Ladies and gentlemen, hello everybody. Welcome to the spoiler-heavy review of The Many Saints of Newark. I was going to put a regular review up. I didn't get to it in time. I figured it's on HBO Max. It came out. People have a chance to see it. So I want to talk about this thing. I don't want to kind of dance around in general, you know? So just a warning. If you haven't seen... A warning for a Warner film. If you haven't seen The Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos film, I would suggest going to watch that first and then come back and watch this, because I'm going to get into all of it because there's so much to talk about in this movie in general. So people, as you know, obviously, as you see in the background there, massive Sopranos fan, been going through the rewatch of the series. Was almost done with the last season when the movie dropped on HBO Max. Decided to stop my rewatch. Figured I had enough. Not I had enough, but I had watched enough of it to say, okay, I'm all refreshed. I remember everything from the get-go anyway, but let's get into it. And people are asking, first of all, what do you think? Because I saw a lot of people were disappointed because it wasn't the origin story of Tony Soprano like they thought it would be. Like, people said it was marketed to be the rise of this mafioso, the Don, and that's not what we got. I disagree. I think that's exactly what we got. The Many Saints of Newark, the title alone, Moltasanti, that's what it comes from. It's Many Saints, and it starts with the story they tell you from the title of the film and from the way David Chase always does stuff, that's what this movie is going to be about. It's going to be about Moltasanti. It's going to be about the Moltasantis. It's The Many Saints of Newark, and even leads inside of a lot of the titles. And it's a tragic story. The whole point of this movie, by the end of it, is that Tony could have gotten out of this damn life, and Dickie was going to let him out of it. Was going to help him get out of the life. And once again, Junior fucks up everything for him. So the whole damn movie's about Tony and the rise. The whole thing. It just has a lot to do with the demons of Dickie Moltasanti. And the two of them, this relationship that they both have throughout the film. And not only Michael Gandolfini, who we'll talk about in a second here, but the young kid who plays him. Because a lot of this movie, by the way, takes place in the 60s, in the end of the 60s during the race riots. And they talk about this in season 1 of The Sopranos. They talk about there's a couple of different throwbacks. There's a lot of great Easter eggs throughout it. But before we really dive into it, what I want to say is that my biggest problem, and I tweeted about this after I saw it, this movie, there's no reason this should have been a movie. This should have been an 6 to 8 hour miniseries. That's my biggest problem with this movie, is that there's way too much to do in too short of a time. I know David Chase always wanted to make movies. It's what he wanted to do, and I think he said at one point that he wished the show didn't get greenlit because he wished he could have done movies. I don't think that works, especially for this. And I tweeted something out over the weekend that I think that movies in general, the movies as a medium, I think you can tell better stories on television, right? Do I think that there should be movies? Of course. Free Guy is a movie that I saw recently that I'll do a review on. Perfect 2-hour film. Great 2-hour movie. Don't need that as a TV series. This, on the other hand, Many Saints of Newark should have been a 8-episode miniseries, because we know so much. And again, people ask me this going into it: should I watch The Sopranos before watching this movie? And the answer is 100% yes. I mean, it starts off with a massive spoiler. And I've already warned you about spoiler chain. You've already gotten spoiled. So Christopher Moltasanti, played by Michael Imperioli, dies in the last season of The Sopranos, and Tony, his uncle, not by blood, but you learn about a little bit more about that in this movie too, kills him. Could have saved him. They get into a car crash. He pinches his nose, chokes him out, chokes on his own blood, dies. So Christopher is talking from the grave, and Christopher is saying how these, the fact, and it was a theme throughout the series, by the way, of, are you going to go to hell? Most likely they're all accepting the fact that they're going to go to hell, and here he is talking from hell about what he did for his uncle. And then they flash back, and when they start to flash back, you get Ray Liotta. I can't emphasize enough the spoilers, by the way. Who comes in as Hollywood Dick Moltasanti. Michela De Rossi plays Giuseppina. Now, what a role she's got in this whole thing, because Hollywood Dick Moltasanti is Dickie's father. We find out that he met her on the other side and comes on over, starts living with him. And right away, Dickie Moltasanti's got this crush on her. And you're like, all right, well, maybe is that Christopher's mom? And the craziest thing that happens in this movie that definitely shocked me, I watched this movie with my wife, and people are asking me, yes, I had the bowl of pasta, I had a bottle of wine, relaxed, it was a great night. And I was watching it. So here is Dick Moltasanti with his father in the car after Ray Liotta throws her down the stairs. They get into an argument. And so he confronts him in the car. And it starts to get a little physical, then it gets really violent. And then he's slamming Ray Liotta's head against the thing. I'm like, all right, well, we know that he lives because they have this whole prison thing. So he's driving to the hospital. And then he gets him to this warehouse. And he's on the floor. I'm like, is he dead? And my wife was like, you just got that now? And I'm like, no, but the trailers. And then he lights him on fire. I go, well, what the hell is going on? Holy shit. And then we reveal that there's a twin, and that's who he's going. And Ray Liotta does a masterful performance as the brothers in this. Some people think that the jail stuff is a dream sequence. I didn't see that, but who knows? But what the twin brother is played so differently. They seem like, I turned to my wife and I was like, Ray Liotta is playing this so brilliantly because I feel those are two separate dudes. Because Hollywood Dick Moltasanti is this big kind of bombastic character, and the brother's more like the Ray Liotta I feel that was kind of happening in Goodfellas and other movies that he was in. And he serves as the Dr. Melfi in this role, and Dickie Moltasanti comes in to see him, and there's this advice throughout the duration of the movie. But like a good 45 minutes of 50 minutes of it plays into the race riots that we hear about in the first one with Tony as a smaller kid. And this is my point where I think all of this should have been covered. And I think Leslie Odom Jr., by the way, who is great, and he was Burr in Hamilton. And what was he in recently? He was in something recently. Oh, he was in the One Night in Miami. Played Sam Cooke. And he is really good in this movie. Where is he? There he is. He is great in this movie, and this is there's a bunch of storylines going on in this movie, and this is like the main storyline where Leslie Odom Jr.'s character is working for Dickie Moltasanti throughout the movie, and then he gets fed up with it, and he wants to go in on business of his own, and he basically goes against Dickie and the crew, and it winds up, you see what he talks about it, the guy that he's going into business with at the end, where they want to take over the neighborhood and they want to bring drugs in, and it's ultimately what happens to this neighborhood when you see it in one of the seasons when Tony comes to bring AJ in, and the neighborhood has kind of been run down by this drug business, and that's what they're alluding to here. But this story is very relevant. It's great. It's also the same reason as Leslie Odom Jr., who winds up after Ray Liotta dies, we see that Giuseppe winds up having a relationship. She becomes Dickie's Gumar. And then there's another crazy scene at the beach where he finds out she's been sleeping with Leslie Odom Jr. And and it's heartbreaking because this whole thing throughout the movie is she wants to open this beauty parlor, and she wants to become, she wants to go into business. She wants to do this thing. He finally does it for her. And then he finds out about Leslie Odom Jr. and he chokes her out in the water, dead. So all of that stuff, that's like that alone is one full movie. That's not all that's going on in this film. That's one movie, and that's the other thing that someone had tweeted me. Someone I don't even think knows who the hell I am or anything too, but it was a Sopranos tweet like, I hope you're honest about this movie and you tell us how bad it is. I didn't feel that way. I feel it's crammed. I feel that my biggest issue. If you do follow me, you will see that I talk about this a lot with a lot of different mediums. If you have the opportunity, especially, which is so ironic, this show, The Sopranos, paved the way for shows today to act like 1 hour movies of the duration of 8, 10, 12, 13 episodes or more, right? And the fact that, David Chase wanted to do a movie, so David Chase gets to do what David Chase wants to do. But I think that it would have served better as a movie, as a miniseries, and this proves it, because it's one particular story. And then the stuff that I felt was missing more so was and I think they wanted to stay away from it in this one, but I think it's what ultimately a lot of the fans wanted to see, including myself, was the DeMeo crime family, right? Like, we see them. But what Sopranos in season 1 did so well was establish the hierarchy. Who's who the capos were, who's collecting to who's trying to move their way up, all that stuff. That's what was so good. It wasn't always about the mafia in Sopranos. It was about the family dynamic, which is what made the show so special. But when it dealt with that stuff, you learned the business of it, of how it all played out and who was who and how. Like, the reason why there's a lot of fan service in here to people who were diehards, because when you see Big Pussy Bombacero and you're like, oh, there's Big Pussy. When you see Silvio and Paulie, and it's like they're all because they've been established, but they don't get enough time to be established in their younger selves in this one. That's why when someone says, do you have to watch beforehand the series? I think you do, because you know them better. You don't get the same kind of attachment to it and to play into those characters, right? I got to get into the actors' names here. Now, I'll tell you who I was expecting who I was hoping to see out of all this was Silvio Dante, who's played by Joe Magaro. Didn't know anything about who was playing Paulie. And I can't even find the guy. Billy Magnuson was playing Paulie. Didn't know anything about him. And then Big Pussy, who's playing Big Pussy? Samson I'm going to mess up his name. Mokiula? Sorry. But Billy Magnuson as Paulie Walnuts is fantastic. Is fantastic. Subtle. There's things that he does throughout it that you see him and you go, yeah, that's the guy. Certain little things where he moves his hands and then he says certain things and he moves and he stands up, and it's not like, it's not an impression. As much as I didn't envy John Magaro for having to do Silvio Dante, because to do this an entire time, it get taxing, because it's big. Yeah, people really like this. I am. So the one thing I hated, which is not his at all, this stupid hair thing. Why would you take that? Why would you do that to Silvio Dante? He's bald in this, and then Nancy gets a hairpiece. Why? They never allude to that in the series. If they do, I missed it. His hair is perfect. And it's stupid. He's got the comb over, and then he finally gets a hair. That's why he has the hair. It's like, I hated that. That I absolutely hated. But that's not him. That's not him. As far as he goes, I felt out of all the cast members, he was the most Saturday Night Live. Like, it was just like, he got the walk down. It was a great impression. It was a great impression. But it was an impression. There's a great scene that he has with Dickie Moltasanti at the end that I thought played into what I was talking about before with the DeMeo crime family. We get to see him as the consigliere finally, and he's getting his chops and talking about Tony, which, don't worry, we're going to close the show with Tony. But all of that, like, I thought that was great for him. But there was just something about him. He was a bit cartoony. And I don't know if that was the direction by Alan Taylor, which I thought he did a very good job in this directing, by the way. But Silvio Dante for me was just a little too over the top, and Silvio's my favorite character in the whole show. And I know it's hard because Steven Van Zandt plays him so big, and he's always got that face. But it's like, and I don't know, there was just something about it when I compared the two, because Paulie's huge in the show. He's really big. But there was something the way this kid played him in this movie that I was like, yeah, that to me isn't an impression. That's Paulie. And speaking of not doing an impression, everybody was wondering, everybody was talking about Michael Gandolfini, right? How's this kid going to be as Tony Soprano, because he's taken the role of his late great legendary father, James Gandolfini, who made this role iconic. And now he's got to pick this kid up, in the just probably early 70s when this happens, when he takes over, because the young kid that played him too was really good. So Michael Gandolfini takes this role, and boy, does he make it his own. And this is the funny thing for people who don't know who the hell I am or don't watch any of my stuff. I recently talked about the Solo film. My biggest gripe with the Solo film was not the performance by Alden Ehrenreich, but it was that it didn't have the essence of who Han Solo was. Like, I never believed that no matter any time throughout the time that we leave that person at the end of the film, will he ever transform into the person we saw in episode 4? They were so far apart for me. It's the exact opposite for this. Like, this isn't the Tony Soprano with all of the rage. You see it. This isn't the Tony Soprano with that bull-like viciousness, but you see it. You see the reason why James Gandolfini was so masterful as Tony Soprano, because you should hate him from the first time you see him to the end of the series, and you want to. But there's something about the humanity that he's able to bring to him at points, whether it's Pyomai, the ducks, the fact that when he jumps into the pool after AJ tries to commit suicide, and he calls him baby. Like, there's just certain there's a gentle thing that James Gandolfini had inside of Tony that could have that juxtaposition with the viciousness and the rage and the anger. Well, Michael Gandolfini has all of that stuff here first, all the innocence and stuff, and there's that he's teetering throughout this movie. He's teetering, and there's that scene with him and Jackie and Artie, and they take over the ice cream thing, and he's got that thing in him. He grew up in this. And by the way, John Bernthal plays his father in this as Johnny Boy Soprano, who plays it, who had very different side of Johnny Boy, which we saw some of it. I actually like this interpretation of Johnny Boy better than I did in the series. I didn't love the portrayal of him in the first season. That was fine, but there's something about this one. They recreate the whole thing when Tony sees. They didn't do the thing where he chops off the guy's thumb or whatever, but they did when he got arrested at the carnival with Junior. And he did that whole thing. They recreated the whole thing when Janice was going to the carnival and Tony saw it and messed him up. But he's going back and forth, and Johnny Boy really wasn't the father figure in his life. It was Dickie. And Dickie, where is that? I have him somewhere, sorry. Dickie and Tony, this whole thing, this is the whole reason. This is why it's tragic. This movie, the more I like the story itself, I think it's such a beautifully written movie, is that this is about Tony. Even though, like I said, there is that full story of everything that's going on with Dickie Moltasanti and the stuff with his Gumar and the stuff with Leslie Odom Jr. and the stuff he's got to deal with, his own tragedy, and that's all that stuff is there. And I before I even get into all the Tony stuff, I have to give a massive props to Alessandro Novella, who plays Dickie Moltasanti. And, he's not an unknown. I mean, God, for God's sake, he was in Face Off. He was Castor Troy's brother. Thank you to William Holman pointing that out. But he's been around for a while, but this is the first big lead thing. Everyone's like, who is this guy? He's great in this as Dickie Moltasanti. And it's his movie, right? As it should be, Many Saints of Newark. I think people were, because there's this relationship that we have with James Gandolfini as Tony, that you immediately have it, and you want to give everything that you have to Michael Gandolfini because it's Michael Gandolfini. You're gonna be a little, if he's got it a little bit, you're gonna be very forgiving, and he has it a lot throughout the whole thing, like everything. Even when he's talking to Olivia, which I want to definitely talk about, played by oh my God, holy God, Vera Farmiga, and Vera Farmiga, by the way, really knocks out. That was what I was worried about. as I was talking about with Silvio, right? I was worried that Vera Farmiga was just going to be doing an impression of Nancy Marchand, and she didn't. She hit the mannerisms. She hit everything. She did everything. Like, even though, oh, come on, ow, poor you, all of it. And there's this tragic scene. Like, there's so much. This is why, again, I'm going to have to keep coming back to the fact that this movie is too short. This should have been a miniseries. There's this whole angle where they talk about Tony and how he's going to be a leader, and he's almost, again, his first kind of interaction with someone that he's spilling his feelings to, the school principal or guidance counselor, whatever she is, and she tells Livia, she says, this is that your son told me a great story about you and how you read him a story one night and it meant the world to him, and you talked like that was massive to him. And it's so tragic because in this scene that I'm talking about in the kitchen, she tries to bake him a hamburger or a cheeseburger or whatever, and he's like, and then he says this line, he goes like, I'm always being accused. And it was such a great Tony line, but it just shows no matter what happens, they just can't see eye to eye. And then there's this tragic thing about these pills. These pills could potentially make her happy, the way that Prozac was helping Tony, right? And he just wants her to try. And there's only one person that could really get her to try, and that's Dickie Moltasanti. He knows Dickie can help. He knows it. So they're at this funeral. Junior falls down like an idiot, like he does, and there's this goofiness that he does, and he throws out, a typical Junior line. Dickie's laughing at him, but Tony says, "Help me out, man. Help me out." And he's like, "All right, let me get into it." And then this is where all this stuff happens that I thought was done so well in the writing, was that Dickie, after all this stuff and all the tragedy he's going through, and this burst of emotion, killing his dad, killing his Gumar, watching all this stuff happen with Leslie Odom Jr., watching this stuff, like he's in the middle of this like war that is about to go down, and now Ray Liotta, the brother, at this point says, "Your nephew, stay away from him." And then there's this moment where Paulie or Silvio and they're all there, and Tony tries to come in, they don't let him in. Tony gets all pissed off, and he's throwing the stereos out the window. And Johnny's like, well, "What this? What this?" He's like, "I don't want to be part of this. I don't want any of this. What this? What this?" And that's when Silvio has a conversation with him of like, maybe I don't even know if he's part of this thing of ours. And Dickie's going to tell him, "Stay out of it. Go play football. Go do the thing." There's even that scene that they mention in the episode, strangely enough, that I was watching when Bacala and Tony fight in season 6B or 7, if you want to call it, and in the cabin, right before they fight, Janice tells a story of how Livia and Johnny were in the car, and she's ragging on him, and Johnny shot his gun through her hair. And in the story that she told, it was Junior and his Gumar, but it was ultimately Dickie and his Gumar, because you see it in the movie. But it's in that car scene where Dickie's like, yeah, he can play football. He may not be pro, but he knows this kid shouldn't be in this business, and because he's pushing it on him throughout the movie, giving him the stereos, doing these things. Even Tony's, "I can't get caught with shit like this." And when we finally realize he's got that change of consciousness, and he says, "No, I'm gonna tell him tomorrow," and he meeting at the place that ultimately, if you believe it or not, Tony dies. It's up to you whether or not you want to believe it or not. But here's Tony waiting for his uncle. And this is going to be the conversation. This is going to be the one that in the multiverse, if you will, Tony has this conversation with Dickie. Dickie says, "Stay out of it. Go to football. Do what you have to do. Stay in school. Go to college and stay in college. Don't just drop out after one semester. Stay there. Don't get involved in any of this shit. And focus on that part of it." And then what happens if Tony decides that Tony wants out of the life, the way that his sister did, both of his sisters did, got the hell out of it and just left? But that doesn't happen. And Dickie Moltasanti is, and we always heard the story of, did he have a crib? What did he have? He didn't really have anything. He was in the back, and someone shoots him. You don't know who shot him, but then you find out it's done, and it's Junior. Petty fucking Junior, who is always all pissed off about everything. and pissed off that this guy was laughing at him, and pissed off that when Johnny Boy was in jail for 5 years, that it was Dickie Moltasanti that Johnny Boy said held it all together and not Junior. It's that pettiness, and of course Soul did a good job as Junior, and you hear it's that that's where the tragedy comes in, and it all worked for me. It all worked for me. So where other people were upset about the fact that you didn't see the rise of Tony Soprano, I don't know what movie they were watching, because it's exactly what you saw. Because at the very end of the movie, as Tony is there, and Janice says, "It was my favorite uncle," and then Olivia, in typical Olivia, is like, "Oh, I always knew. I thought he was so strong," and blah 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 blah. And then there's the pinky swear, and then the music, the classic music pops in, and then in the post-credit scene we see because Dickie dies, then that's what happens. The war was won by Leslie Odom Jr., and then we see what happens down the line with Newark, and how the Newark territory was kind of lost. So again, this hearing myself talk about it, this is not all the performances, fantastic. Directing, great. Story, awesome. Just crammed into a 2-hour film. That's my biggest gripe. There's and you know, Silvio, I think if they do a miniseries, by the way, because David Chase has a new deal, they're probably going to wind up doing 2 more movies, which I really hope they don't. I'll watch it. You're not going to get me not to watch it, but I would much rather. I think you're going to get too much. You're going to get so much more in a miniseries. You know, we see the Feach Lamana card game or whatever. You know, you see Carmela briefly in this, but yeah, for people who are saying they didn't see the rise of Tony Soprano, it's exactly what it was. It was the origin story of why. If Dickie Moltasanti doesn't die, we don't get the Tony Soprano that we got down the line. We get that Tony Soprano might have gone off to different college. That Tony Soprano might have done a lot of different things. He might have gotten out of the business. That's what the tragedy was. He was that's where Michael Gandolfini does such a great job of bringing out that emotion, bringing out that innocence. That is ultimately that's where I think the way that I interpreted it was Tony's innocence dies inside of that ice cream parlor shop, which ultimately is the diner at the end of the series, and dies twice there. That's the way that I took it. But really loved this movie. I really did. I needed more. I definitely needed more. A lot more. There's 7 different movies going on. I wanted to see more with the rise of Paulie and Silvio and Big Puss and everybody. I wanted to see more with Tony and Artie and Jackie Aprile. I wanted to see more with Dickie Moltasanti and how it worked inside of the DeMeo crime family. There was so much more that you could have shown that we didn't get to see. So that's my biggest gripe. It was just too much to put into a 2-hour film. It's 2 hours. I mean, Casino is almost 3 hours, for God's sakes. And there was way more to put in here. So, yeah, and Silvio was too big. I don't necessarily know if it was the actress and the stupid hair thing. The hair thing was stupid. Not the Olivia Soprano getting shot through the hair. The Tony Silvio having the comb over. Pointless. Absolutely pointless. No reason to do that to one of the best characters of all time. Yeah, there was nothing. There was no reason. I loved it. I'm going big with it. I'm going 4 out of 5 schmoes. I thought it was a great prequel, but it left me wanting more. That's when I would have, for that woman who tweeted me out at me and said, like, oh, be honest and say how terrible it was. If it was terrible, I would have been like, why did they do this? Like what they're doing with like Terminator, they keep making more movies, or Die Hard. It's like, why do they keep making this? Stop, let it lie. If I felt like that, then I would have thought it was terrible. That was not this for me. That was more. Let me see more Michael Gandolfini as Tony. Let me see more Corstola as Junior. Let me see more John Bernthal as Johnny Boy. Let me see more Vera Farmiga as Livia. More. That's what I want, and I hope that it happens. So anyway, that's my review, my heavy review of The Many Saints of Newark. I hope you enjoyed it. Please check out our show that we have here, The Big Thing. It's on every day, well, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Got a show on Friday with Star Wars show, a bunch of other things. All right, everybody. I'll see you on the flip side. Thank you for checking us out here on my channel here, the SEN channel. Peace out, everybody.